to the Holy Hardwood podcast, where your New Orleans Pelicans win 96-87 against the New York Knicks tonight. Brandon Ingram had 26 points, 7 rebounds, 3 assists on 11 of 17 from the field. Zion Williamson had 24 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, 12 of 17 from the field. Herb Jones contributed 10 points, 2 rebounds, 1 assist. CJ McCollum had 12 points, 3 rebounds, 7 assists. And on the bench, Jordan Hawkins had 9 points and was 3 of 6 from the field. Just to welcome back Pat into the pod, is there anything just to start out that you maybe liked from this game or maybe disliked?
Yeah, good evening, Tony. Thanks again for having me on the pod. I've been looking forward to this for a couple days now since our last win earlier in the week. Yeah, looking at this game tonight, I'd say the Pelicans, took care of a less talented Knicks team coming off of a back-to-back. So really no surprise there from my perspective, right? As I have pretty high expectations for this team on a nightly basis. So for them to come in, hold that Knicks team to a low shooting percentage, low first half number, really kind of jump started their evening and allowed them to kind of cruise to this opening home win. So excited to see that they took care of business early and just rode it out to the end.
Definitely kind of going off of what you said, I think it all started in that first quarter where the New Orleans Pelicans came out and only allowed 12 points defensively. This is something that, we've kind of touched on kind of for every game is for the Pels kind of starting out strong and maybe, holding these teams to these lower scores and kind of getting out on front, especially since this was the first home game, coming out with some energy and using that energy on the defensive end, which then led to their offense, which I thought was, even a little better from that first game.
Yeah, certainly. I think there were, things you could take from both games from an offensive and defensive perspective. When kind of looking in contrast to that opening night game, I think the defense was a little sharper tonight. Rotations were a little bit tighter. Guys were kind of covering for other guys. Areas when they were taking gambles or taking chances to, potentially get deflections and getting out and running. In terms of offense, I think it was nice to see, Zion and Bi kind of pick up where they left off. Assuming that first game was opening night and they were kind of working through some of that rust from the offseason. But I know we did see CJ struggle a little bit compared to that opening night game. I think that was just more in terms of, how the game was going at the time and how Zion and Brandon were kind of controlling the tempo and kind of, managing things from an offensive perspective. It did, follow a pretty similar script in terms of that second unit kind of getting in there. I know, last game we kind of looked at Matt Ryan there, who actually gave us 9 points off the bench, hit 3 threes to kind of jumpstart us. And looking at this game, rookie Jordan Hawkins came in and was able to kind of emulate that same thing and provide the team with another 3-point or 3 threes off the bench, which kind of uplifted that group and was allowed to not only, hold the lead essentially or maintain the lead that Zion and Brandon had set for them, but also increase it and allow them to kind of push that lead ahead and start looking into the second half there with a double-digit lead.
Yeah, going off of what you were saying, kind of bringing up those bench guys, I kind of want to hit on some of that. Matt Ryan and Jordan Hawkins, Dyson Daniels, kind of the main guys off the bench tonight. And like you said, Matt Ryan didn't have his best performance from the outside tonight, going 1 of 8. But you can kind of see just from the start, from last game, him making a few shots, kind of the gravity he has, the defense's attention. And with Jordan Hawkins now hitting 3 more shots tonight. Would you kind of agree with that? That's kind of been even just a change from the first game to second game. The Knicks coming in and kind of being a team that's even looking after for Matt Ryan and where he's at on the floor and kind of opening it up and giving more space to some of the other guys on the team.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what we've been saying for a couple of years now, right? You'd love to have somebody that comes in on a nightly basis and hits a high number of threes and shoots at a high percentage, but even just the threat alone of somebody who can hit some open shots and make you pay for sagging off and playing one step over in a driving lane. Even the threat of that, like you said, Matt Ryan playing one game, hitting a couple shots, you could already see, he was providing Zion and Brandon one extra step, when taking it to the rim, and that allowed them to kind of get from A to B a little bit more efficiently and ultimately get better looks around the rim. So I think this is just kind of the sentiment that we've been working off of here for a while, just looking for guys to space the floor and they don't have to always shoot at a you know tenacious clip, but just to keep that defense honest and keep that defender, at least one eye on that guy or that shooter, just so they can't just sit in the lap of both Zion and Brandon as they're driving to the rim. So I think that was a really, really good thing to see already in game two, and with Jordan kind of continuing that tonight, looking ahead into the next game. I think that's a trend that you're going to see not only continue over the next couple games, but also expand as we kind of work in some of those other guys, including Trey.
Yeah, most definitely. And, we kind of talked about this player in the first episode or the first recap after the Memphis Grizzlies game, and, kind of Herb Jones and kind of seeing what he's been able to do offensively. But, tonight was one of those classic games by Herb, just kind of getting into everybody defensively. Julius Randle, RJ Barrett, Jalen Brunson, you name it. He was there, but just seeing that confidence grow on that offensive end has just been a real treat to see.
Yeah, I think we're truly seeing the maturation of Herb Jones as a professional player. He came into this league as being very raw offensively, a guy who was able to dominate the collegiate level um, as kind of a two-way defender who kind of was still able to contribute offensively, but that was in terms of just being a little bit better athlete than everybody else, or maybe being a little bit bigger at his position for the collegiate game. But you're seeing his game truly mature and grow, and like you said, he's gaining confidence on a nightly basis. Um, it truly has shifted already within 2 games, and it's when he gets an open look, you're kind of expecting him to knock that thing down, and that's certainly a huge change from last year. Even though I know he did have some streakier moments during the year, this for some reason, I know it's early, just kind of feels like there's something a little bit different to it. I think you kind of touched on it, it's the confidence. And as great as he's been offensively, I think there's still another level he could go in terms of being a driver, being a cutter, being a screener, and being able to work into some different actions. With those main guys being Brandon Zion and CJ. But in terms of defense, right, he's picked up right where he left off. He appears to be everywhere. He's taken the best assignment on each night, and not only does he do that, is once that ball is kicked from that player, you'll see him kind of playing that secondary backline defense, whether it's picking up deflections or stepping over for key charges. He's certainly cementing himself as an early pick to potentially make one of those All NBA defensive teams, depending on the team's success this year.
Yeah, and I just kind of like Herb Jones, just these first 2 games. He was kind of all about business and still is, kind of his first 2 years in the league. And just kind of seeing more of a confidence, like I said, which I think is now kind of made for, more emotion on the floor. After maybe say he gets an and one or gets a defensive stop, normally he would probably just, stay to himself and not do too much. But, you see him kind of yelling out there and kind of have that confidence. And so I think that's something really good for this team to kind of have another guy out there who kind of has an edge to him.
Yeah, I think an edge is a good word for that. I think a lot of those guys that kind of play that role on title contending teams, although don't always need to be at the same level as say a Draymond Green or a Patrick Beverly, but all those top defenders and kind of 3 and D guys that get big minutes certainly do have a little bit of that edge and personality themselves as they're locking up some of the best players in the world on a nightly basis. You do need to have that confidence in yourself, and sometimes that emotion is going to bleed over, following big plays. So again, I think it's just a part of the maturation that Herb is experiencing right now, and there's no reason that I don't see that continuing as we work through this season.
Hmm. And definitely with, some of those other key distributors from the bench being out, Trey, who kind of has that personality, and Jose, who brings that energy every single night. It's good to kind of see, Zion kind of once he starts to get it going, show some emotion, and with Herb kind of having those other guys where Brandon's kind of more quiet, lets the game speak for himself, and doesn't show too much emotion. So it's always good to kind of see that, and I think all of these guys kind of have more confidence now, and I don't know if that's just an offensive thing, just them being together for a couple years now, or just being a little older in this league, seeing a bunch of different things.
Yeah, I would say it's probably just kind of growing in that role as a player in the league. I think when you're talking about those guys that kind of have a voice, Herb hasn't been in the year or been in the league for 6, 7 years. He's still a relatively young player, and has only been playing for a couple seasons, so he's still kind of considerably getting his feet wet. There's some guys he probably to this point, depending on injuries and whatnot, he hasn't even faced before, defended against. So I think as he kind of runs his table on the league and is able to kind of see everything at face value and work through that and gain from those experiences, I think that you're kind of just seeing him come out of his shell and kind of expand that that personality of his, which is always great to see.
Yeah, and just moving on from that, I just really thought the defense kind of locked in tonight and kind of fed into that offense, kind of like we were saying in the first game. The more stops you get, the better chances you can get out and run and kind of set up that offense just going and just kind of not having to set an offense and get into any type of play. And I think that's kind of our best offense. But to hold the New York Knicks to 36% from the field and 18% from three, I think that's a big, eye opener. And if the Pels can, start to do that game in and game out, that'll give them, really good chance against anybody in this league.
Yeah, and I think when looking at it, right, I think the numbers can sometimes be a little bit deceiving. This is a like you'll hear so many times be said, it is a make or a miss league. So I think if a couple of those shots end up falling for them tonight early on, maybe this looks entirely differently. And not to say that they didn't play well defensively or play hard, right? But it is still early to kind of take this as a benchmark game, right? And say, oh well, they held them to sub 40% shooting and sub 90 points from the field, or for the game essentially, and already start mailing it in as they're one of the best defensive teams in the league. But again, when saying that, they did have a strong defensive net rating last year, and I know that is something that Willie is going to hang his hat on and is preaching on a day-to-day basis. So it wouldn't surprise me that as we work through this year, that the team is hovering around there, around a top 10 defense overall, and hopefully they kind of have a top 10 offense there to kind of follow suit and work together with that defense.
Yeah, I think it's kind of telling too, kind of going with that defensive prowess here to only score 96 points tonight and still, come out with a victory against, like you're saying, a Knicks team who's coming off of a back-to-back. But, anytime you can hold a team under 90 points, that's always good, especially when you're only scoring 96. So it's showing that this team is learning how to win in different ways. Would you kind of agree on that?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things to take from that. Certainly, I think that they are learning how to play different styles, right? I think tonight was a little bit slower pace. There were certainly spurts there that they were getting up and down, but in totality, I do think it was a slightly slower pace. I think tonight's game also kind of showed you that when Brandon and Zion have it kind of clicking early and they're getting low over production, they have the ability to they have knockout power. If they're able to get a couple stops here and there, as efficiently as those two were playing and as skilled as they are offensively, they have the ability to knock teams out right early in the third quarter and put a 15-point lead on their head and essentially take them out of the game. So while they're working through, finding themselves offensively and finding new identities and how to put points on the board, I think ultimately, this conversation comes down to 1-14. This team ultimately goes as far as those two take them. Everything kind of stems from them. So when they're as efficient as they were tonight, and kind of taking turns and holding off any potential runs coming from the Knicks, it's a difficult duo and a difficult team to kind of come back when they're able to score as efficiently as they are.
Yeah, agreed. And Kind of just one thing I've seen just over the last couple years and just, kind of to start this year. It always seems like the Pels can kind of get off to a good start and good second quarter and take it to halftime, but I think their biggest struggles is when they've had these bigger leads is to come out of that, third quarter and like you said, kind of get on the attack again or kind of kill and, kind of get that game out of hand and instead, they let the team kind of creep back a little bit and then they got to kind of go a little harder in the fourth for a couple more minutes rather than being able to sit some of the starters and rest them up a bit. But I think that's kind of their next step in the maturation is just to kind of, come out of those half times when they do have leads and say, let's end this game right now instead of kind of, playing around a little bit.
Yeah, I think there's a shift in mentality. I think they kind of understand that responsibility falls on them. You don't see them kind of looking around and looking for other people to kind of take the onus upon themselves to, whether it is to keep those runs going or when the Knicks had a 10-3 run in that game in that third quarter, essentially it was up to them to pretty much stop the bleeding or cut the head off the snake and stop that run and get the team back on track offensively. I think the one advantageous aspect of the duo of Brandon and Zion is, in comparison to maybe some other duos across the league offensively, those two aren't predicated on perimeter jump shooting, right? There are some duos that shoot a lot more threes and are very effective at that, but certainly when you're shooting a lot of long jump shots and a lot of long 3 point shots, that certainly opens you up to some sustained droughts, some more difficult shooting slumps, and ultimately can be a little bit more difficult to kind of stop the bleeding at times. So having guys like Zion and Brandon that live around the rim and Zion and Brandon himself kind of working around that free throw line and low post area, I think it opens you up to getting a lot of clean looks, in isolation that certainly allows you to kind of stop runs quicker than some other teams might be able to.
Yeah, definitely. And kind of just going off of the Bi and Zion thing, you saw them tonight. Have a combined 50 points, 12 rebounds, 5 assists on 23 of 34 from the field, which is around 68%. I mean, I don't know where that ranks, up there in their games where they've been together as a duo, but it just seems early on right here that would be, one of those games that you would probably mark down as being one of their best as a duo together. I would like to see the assists a little higher, but like you said, when both of them kind of got it going right there and they're so efficient, that's just going to happen with the assists. But uh, I kind of like where Brandon was at rebound wise with 7 and Zion chipped in 5 right there. So you can't really complain about the effort and kind of what they did tonight because I think it was one of their better performances together as a duo.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think, where the game was in terms of halfway through that fourth, I think it ultimately probably would have shown statistically, or at least on paper, as even better of a night, right? I don't have the numbers in front of me, but like you mentioned, we'd like to see those assists a little bit higher. But I would imagine if you looked at potential assists and had a look at that data, you'd see that both of those guys were probably, if not flirting with around 10 for each one of them, they'd at least be at 5, 6, 7. So they certainly were finding their teammates for open shots. It just was a night that not as many perimeter shots fell. So that's ultimately going to change the way that some of those stats look. But it certainly seems like they're finding their groove, playing with one another. I would say tonight wasn't as effective in terms of one-on-one game with each other, but they did a really good job of kind of taking turns and being able to identify when teams were loading up on one versus the other. So to see them play as well as they did, and most importantly, as efficiently as they did, which is the most important thing, was a great thing when looking forward. So happy to see that.
Yeah, and just bouncing off of that, just going into kind of what Brandon Ingram has shown you these first 2 games. Is there anything in particular that you've liked that you've seen in him? Have you seen a jump? Is there just a different way that he looks or kind of presents himself there on the floor? And kind of what have you liked from his point of view these first 2 games?
I'd say Brandon is kind of following, some very similar, um, pathways that he has in previous years, you can still see that he's still a quiet leader. He still leads by how he's playing, but you can see that to me, it seems like there's a little bit more, um, not self belief, but it just seems like his game is more quiet now, right? It just seems like he's kind of in cruise control, working his way through these games, getting to his spots. I made a comment during the game. It looks like he's kind of just floating from spot to spot. He's not working as hard as he used to have to get to his spots and find his shot. So I think there's a level of maturity there. I think the game has continued to slow down for him. I think his handle has gotten a little bit better from last year, and I think he's doing a good job of changing pace and playing at different speeds, which ultimately, in combination with his size and length and shooting ability, certainly is a super difficult combination of skills to possess as a three level scorer. But yeah, I'm impressed with what I've seen so far with Brandon. I sense he's still kind of working himself into the flow of the year. I think he's making a conscious effort to get others involved as they're kind of still kind of nurturing the confidence of those others playing around him. But um, nothing I'd see so far would expect, or I would expect anything less than a big season from Brandon.
Yeah, and I just kind of want to add in. It just feels like maybe in years past when he had a matchup maybe on the post, maybe just because he was less strong than he is now. I feel like he's really put a lot of time into developing his body. But anytime he kind of sees a mismatch or a smaller guy on him, he just feels like if he can get to the elbow or that block and kind of face up or posting him up, and he gets to his spot, it seems like it's pretty much over from that point.
Yeah, and that's something that he needs to lean into. Just as some guys can lean into the perimeter shooting, and I know that's an area a lot of people would like to see Brandon expand his game and shoot more threes at a higher volume, which is great, right? I mean, sure, if he can do that, that's obviously beneficial to himself and the team. If those are good looks and he's doing it at an efficient clip. But there's also a lot of guys, in this league that would like to be able to go down to the low block in the 12 to 15 foot area and have a mismatch against pretty much any defender guarding them. That when he's shooting over that left or right shoulder or whatever it is, he's essentially not seeing a defender there. So that's a pregame shoot around drill shot that he's shooting with a high level of confidence. But I would definitely agree that there's probably a little bit of added confidence there just in terms of what he's been able to do with his body and the strength that he's added. But yeah, that's something that I've been certainly really really wanting him to lean into the last couple of years. Is I think it's a big area of strength of his game is that low block, extended elbow. Um, you know, kind of mid 2000s or late 2000s, Kobe operated a lot in that space. Dirk operated a lot in that space. If you're able to make that shot, it's a difficult shot to guard, and ultimately they're going to have to send a second defender from somewhere. So it's ultimately going to open up a shot from somewhere else. So really, really would like to see him kind of continue leaning into that and even go into it more often.
Yeah, definitely. And going off of Bi, you gotta talk about Zion and what he's done this year so far, and how he looked and moved tonight. I feel like he kind of came out with more of an edge, where in Memphis he kind of sat back. I felt and kind of let the game come. It was his first game in 9-10 months, and I feel like just getting that energy from the home crowd tonight, he kind of looked a little more spry and a little more touch around the rim, and looked really really good tonight.
Yeah, Zion, he looked good. He looked a lot like that best version that we saw of him last year. He's getting downhill. You could see that even when a defense, coached by Tibbs was giving him a lot of space and kind of they were trying to force the issue of him to settle for jump shots. He was dribbling into that space and closing the distance there quickly and pretty much hitting that launch pad around the free throw line and elevating and getting around the rim. Yeah, it seems like that touch is something that's kind of found itself here in the last couple days. I think a lot of it just comes from the confidence of playing in Memphis, taking a couple hits, and you know seeing that he is fine and no issues, kind of hanging over from last year. So I think that as we kind of work through the next 2 or 3 games, you're going to really see him round into form and really becoming a handful around the rim and in the paint. So
Yeah, and kind of just to end things off, is there anything you kind of want to just touch on if we didn't touch on it here? Kind of things you like seeing forward, maybe coaching or lineup things that you saw tonight.
yeah, I think the coaching's been good so far. I think Willie's doing a good job. I would imagine that he's taking some advice from Coach JB in terms of rotations and adjustments and substitutions. You're seeing a couple things that up until this point wouldn't be typical of Willie in terms of his substitution patterns or moments in games. You'll see him make substitutions for certain scenarios to give guys extra space, or he'll pull JV and get a shooter in there to expand the floor a little bit. So I think the coaching staff has done a good job of making adjustments throughout the game based on the situation, and certainly who's kind of rolling at that time. So they're doing a good job of that. Um, I would like to see that the rest of that bench unit continues to play well together. I think tonight you saw not only did Hawkins shoot it well with that bench rotation, but you saw that those guys were playing really hard. I know Matt Ryan didn't shoot it very well tonight, but he did a really good job. He played hard. He got on the floor a couple times. He was making a lot of nice extra passes around the perimeter to get other guys open shots and made a couple nice defensive rotations to ultimately help end possessions and get back headed in the other direction. So that was a positive sign. I think the big thing, especially here, probably for the next 5 to 10 games, is going to be we're just going to be looking at that duo. That duo truly is going to be driving um, a lot of the success for this team, especially early as we await getting some of that depth back, which is certainly an advantage for this group. But I think looking ahead to that Warriors game on Monday, that's going to be the first true test. I think it's a big test for both Zion and Brandon, um, individually, but most importantly as a duo. I think that's going to be the first, tandem or group of guys, 2 or 3 guys that they're going to look across so far this year, and they're up to par with them. So I think they're going to have a big night, working with Steph and folks. So look to have them come out, be aggressive, really set the tone, and would love to see a game where both of those guys are kind of sitting there touching almost 30 apiece as a group, because I certainly think it's going to be needed.
Great insight tonight on the podcast, and I do appreciate you coming in. So, yeah, thanks for coming on in today. And just going forward again, your New Orleans Pelicans start 2-0 on the season, getting the 96-87 win against the New York Knicks, as their next game is against the Warriors Monday night here at the SKC Center. So, really hoping for a big crowd and, nice game, like you said. Steph's coming into town, so that'll be interesting, and excited to see how that one goes, but definitely feels good to be 2-0.